Hello, my name is Sandy Adamitis, the social media director for the Page International Screenwriting Awards, and your host for the Writers Hangout, a podcast that celebrates the many stages of writing, from inspiration to the first draft, revising, getting a project made, and everything in between. We'll talk to the best and the brightest in the entertainment industry and create a space where you can hang out, learn from the pros, and have fun. Hey writers, we have a great show for you today as two more Page Awards judges, David Portlock and John Evans, continue our conversation on how they evaluate your screenplay. David Portlock has worked as a script reader for United Talent Agency and currently works for Bassett Vance Productions. Over the past 15 years, David has consulted and assisted dozens of writers in the development of their films. Also a screenwriter himself, David wrote and directed a feature film that was picked up by HBO, Cinemax, and Starz, a short film that he premiered at Sundance, and a horror script that toppled the Bloodlist. As a Page judge, David evaluates screenplays in the science fiction, thriller horror, comedy, and drama categories. Next up, John Evans received his MFA in screenwriting from Boston University, and since moving to LA, he has worked in the development departments at ABC Studios, The Donner's Company, Kopelson Entertainment, and AEI. John has also taught writing at the college level, authored 6 educational books, and worked as a copywriter and editor for several film distribution companies. John is the editor of our Page Awards ezine, and as a contest judge, he primarily reads thriller horror scripts and TV drama pilots. These two judges drop a lot of helpful info in this interview. So let's get comfy, grab a beverage of your choice, put in your AirPods, unless you're driving, and let's get started. David Portlock and John Evans, thank you so much for joining us on the Writers Hangout.
Great to be here with you today, Sandy.
Yes, Sandy, great to be here.
So happy to have you both. Now, before we get started, do you want to do a round of Would You Rather?
Sure.
Okay, I'm not sure what that is, but go ahead.
John, would you rather live a peaceful life in a small cabin in the woods or a drama-filled life in a mansion in a big city?
I think I'm going to take the cabin and just watch the dramatic life on TV or in a movie.
Perfect.
Okay.
David, would you rather everyone you love forget your birthday or sing you happy birthday for 24 hours straight?
Oh, how about everyone forget my birthday?
I'm with you on that one, 100%. John, would you rather start a colony on another planet or be the leader on Earth?
So I'm just starting the colony, but not the leader on this other planet.
I think it's implied that you're going to be the leader.
Oh, okay. So I'm the leader either way, but it would be Earth or another planet. Give me the fresh start. Maybe it'll help us avoid some of the mistakes we made here.
David, would you rather be an unknown superhero or an infamous villain?
I'll take unknown superhero.
John, would you rather give up coffee or soda forever?
Whoa, well, I am drinking a soda right now. But definitely I could not live without coffee.
David, would you rather have a tattoo of the title of the last script you read or the last TV you watched?
So I got to pick a tattoo?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, all right. I go with the last TV show I watched.
And what would your tattoo be?
Oh my goodness. It would probably be something for ESPN.
Okay.
Mine would be
Well,
Barry, so that's a small tattoo.
All right, that's good.
yeah, no pain there.
Nope.
John, would you rather have a tennis lesson from Serena Williams or a soccer lesson from Megan Rapone?
Well, I was terrible at soccer as a kid and marginally better at tennis, and I just have more enthusiasm for tennis. So I'm going to go with Serena.
Cool. Last one, David. Would you rather read the book or watch the movie?
Oh.
Ooh, wow. If I really have to choose, I would probably read the book.
Good. My first question for you both. As a judge for the Page Awards, we ask you to evaluate a script based on 10 elements: premise slash concept, presentation, structure, plot, pacing, characters, dialogue, theme, style slash tone, and commercial potential. John, what's the first thing you look for when you start reading a brand new script?
Well, I think it's a tough one because I really have two criteria that if they're met, either of them, it tends to make the script work and overshadows everything else. The first is the broad umbrella quality of writing, which, of course, can greatly impact most, if not all, of the elements that you listed that a Page Awards scorecard asks us to rate. So I'm going to put that aside for now. Independent of pure writing talent, the most critical element for me has got to be premise slash concept, because this is the plot engine that will drive the whole story, and it really kind of touches everything. It's the foundational idea that makes one story different from another. I think genre is always the least original part of a script, and those familiar mechanics desperately need to be viewed from a new lens if you're going to make any one particular story feel unique. And I think that the time, the place, and the culture of the setting, even sometimes the characters themselves, can be part of that premise if they bring the unique quality that makes one log line stand out from the rest. Sometimes it is the who and the where that makes the what and the why feel fresh and different, because it changes how everything plays out. But for
Right.
me, I just think premise slash concept is the straw that stirs the drink, the fresh idea that makes each moment unique and pushes both the plot line and its characters to places that we don't see every day.
Right. David, how about for you? What's the
Well,
first thing you look for when you start reading a brand new script?
I want to put the 10 elements aside just for 1 second here. I'll be brutally honest. The first thing, probably a critical thing is the log line. If the log line is perfectly written, I know the script is going to be really good. If the log line is all over the place and unfocused and the English isn't where it should be, this is going to tell me the script is probably going to read the same way. The next thing I look for, as soon as I open the script, I look for the formatting. If the formatting is not perfect, I know we're going to have a problem right away.
Oh, yeah.
It's got to be obviously in screenplay form, final draft, So if the log line's good, the formatting's good, okay, I know that it's probably going to be a fun read. Now, in terms of the 10 elements, I got to agree with John. The premise concept is probably number one. It's got to be believable. And following that, I have to say the style tone has to be consistent. I've read some comedies, and the style tone is not consistent. It might start Annie Hall and end up Dumb and Dumber, which, is two different movies. That goes for really any genre. The way you start out the script and the way you maintain the style tone throughout is very, very important. The movie you start out with is the movie you want to finish with in terms of what you're trying to say.
Of course, the concept should be in the log line, right? I think we're in agreement that the log line will tell you so much.
Right. We should have a whole podcast on just creating a log line.
Well, yeah, that's the first thing the reader really takes a look at. I'll be honest again, it's what the reader decides to, the script he or she wants to read first. If the log line's fantastic, boom, that script's going to get attention. If the
Right.
log line's not well done, well, that script,
Right.
it'll be read, but with the reader knowing that there could be problems with the script as a whole.
Got it. Now, there's a saying in the industry that a good beginning keeps the reader going, but a strong ending makes or breaks your screenplay. When you start reading a script, what really hooks you in and makes you want to keep reading? And then I'd like to talk about the ending. But do you want to start with that, John? What really hooks you in?
Well, I think when a script immediately thrusts me into a situation that is compelling right off the bat, and I know what's happening, I'm oriented in the situation, I can see the dramatic stakes, I know enough about the character or their circumstances to be invested in the outcome of this immediate scenario. I like that a lot when, you hit the ground running and you immediately put us in a situation that could almost be a short film.
Everybody says, make your first 10 pages great, which is such a blanket statement, but to look at it as a short film right at the first 10 pages, that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. How about, we'll come back to the ending with you, John. How about for you, David? What's the first thing you look for when you start reading a new script?
I definitely would have to agree with John on the first 10 pages being killer, the one thing that really draws you in. But I think for me, I really look for the dialogue. If the dialogue is fresh and interesting, you're going to draw me right in right away.
Right.
And that's something that will keep me engaged. If the dialogue is expository and the characters sound like they're talking to me directly and not to each other, that's going to be a problem. But if the dialogue is, crackling in the first 10 pages, I'm hooked. I'm in it.
You read the first bit of dialogue and it crackles. Do you kind of close the script, then just clutch it and go, oh, this is going to be a good one?
Well, if I had a hard copy, I would do that.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I remember doing that.
John, what does a writer need to do to nail a strong finish?
Well, I think the best endings usually leave me with an emotional response of some kind. I think usually it's like a bittersweet feeling, or there's an upbeat ending that feels earned by the story that came before it. I'm okay with a little bit of a kind of ending if that ambiguity makes me keep thinking about the script after I'm done reading it, or if it didn't damage the story that I had admired and enjoyed leading up to that point. So I think we're kind of really talking about the final act climax here, the pinnacle of the drama. And in that kind of make it or break it scenario, I would say the make it kind of ending probably hinges on the climax. I want the protagonist or the lead character's final test to really push them to the limit and demand that they take action that is even more clever and resourceful than I thought they were capable of. Almost regardless of genre, I think stories rarely work without their characters facing extreme difficulty in the end and either overcoming it or succumbing, at least in part, which in many scenarios I think can be just as emotionally resonant or satisfying as watching them win outright. But that conflict has to reach a boiling point, and the challenge has to reach an ultimate level in order to pay off all the suspense that you've built up with the audience from the beginning. We've been waiting for it, and you have to deliver.
John, you used the word earn. Can you just expand on it a little, what you mean by earn?
Absolutely. Yeah. An earned happy ending is one where it doesn't feel contrived. The cavalry just didn't show up at the end and save the day, or the characters just got lucky, or something kind of silly, deus machina kind of an ending. Instead, they absolutely rose to the challenges, and they proved to me that they did things that most people aren't capable of, and we saw them actually problem solve and have grit and mettle that most people don't. And when you see all of those things come together, you're like, yeah, it feels good, it feels right that it worked out for them.
Cool. David, how about you?
Your third act is your wrap up. So you have to have one specific ending.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want 10 endings, which a lot of scripts have. Wrap things up as quickly as possible. Your protagonist succeeds or doesn't succeed, whatever you want to happen, but just wrap it up fast and very quickly.
Got
Get
it.
straight to it and end it. Don't, and go, well, here's an epilogue. And then we find out what happened 10 years later. And then we go on and learn what happened with the person's kids and all this. It's like, no,
Got it. And John, you read a lot of TV dramas for the content. With a TV drama pilot, speaking of endings, do you have to wrap up every plot point in a pilot at the end?
I don't think so. I mean, within reason. I mean, every episode of television should be its own story with a discrete beginning, middle, and an end. But of course, you want your pilot to feel intriguingly open-ended too. You want to leave us eager to see what happens in the next episode. It shouldn't feel like the whole story has been told, just that the first story in this series of stories has reached a satisfying conclusion in and of itself, if that makes any sense.
Yes, absolutely. John,
Mm-hmm.
going back to television pilots, introducing your lead for a television drama, what's your advice? Do I have to show my lead right away?
No, I don't think so. I mean, again, within reason, because the lead needs an appropriately memorable and dramatic introduction, and that doesn't always lend itself to the first scene or two in every story. Act breaks have become really fluid these days, as really the definition of television itself has. But you should still have a pretty good reason if you're not introducing the lead before your first implied act break.
When you're reading science fiction, how do you think a writer can best create those often complex worlds and explain all the science and not be boring and expositional?
Right. Well, as a writer, this is something that I have to deal with, and it's very tough. But I think the best thing for a writer to do is not really explain the science fiction. They don't need to be too technical with it because that slows things down. It's very boring, and the writer's going to fall out. Let's take Star Wars for an example. The science isn't explained, it just starts out. Okay? You know what a spaceship is. The stormtroopers with their guns, you can figure it out. You don't have to explain that. There's some explanation for the lightsaber, but I think since science fiction is really visual,
Right.
just show the visual. And with the amount of science fiction out there today, you don't really have to explain. Look at the movie Predator. When the Predator, bends light and he becomes invisible, you don't need to explain that. We get it. He's an alien. These are alien devices.
And he has that cool sound.
Yeah.
I love the sound.
Don't get carried away because believe it or not, the reader and the audience don't really care about the explanation. If you can show it to them and they can see how it works, you're fine. Just keep going.
Great. And what typical cliches do you see that screenwriters should avoid when writing a science fiction script?
Okay. This is kind of important to me, and I'm glad you asked this question. For science fiction, you have to be fast. If you're a new writer, you want to get noticed. You don't go write the next Star Wars, 130-page space opera. Right. Okay? You don't want to overwrite it. You want to keep it brief, and you want it to be mostly a contained story. I think one of the best ones I've read for the contest, I think it was called Control Room. And this is one of the top sci-fi scripts. And I think it was like 82 pages. Yeah, there was no explanation. It's one contained setting about a woman who has to take on an alien invasion. And it wasn't out of control.
David, is this for 2022?
No, I think it was 2021.
I just didn't know if we were letting a cat out of the bag or anything.
No, I would never mention it. No. This is like 2020, 2021. Yeah, it's just don't try to do too much. You want to get noticed before you go on and write the next Battlestar Galactica or the next Star Trek franchise or that type of thing. I think it's doing too much is what the screenwriter has to watch out for with science fiction. Keep it simple. Don't try and reinvent the wheel with sci-fi. You know what I mean? Don't trust me. Every reader who's going to be reading your script and it's a sci-fi, they have seen all the sci-fi movies and TV shows. I guarantee it. I guarantee there's nothing that hasn't been seen at some point. So instead of relying too heavily on the tech, just make sure you tell a good story with great characters.
Great. I love that.
And don't write 130, 140 page space fantasy. That's not going to get you noticed. What's going to get you noticed is a 90-page, fast-paced actioner with a fantastic protagonist and a great villain.
Great.
You're here. Can I say something random?
Sure.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm really glad that David has hit a lot of the points that I tell writers. I feel like we're covering a lot of ground here, and
we're both kind of hopefully hitting all the points that will help writers.
Yes, you guys absolutely are. And the name of this episode is going to be David and John Agree. Is there any one thing a writer can do that gives you pause when you're reading their script? John.
Okay. Well, I could take that question in a couple different directions, but here's how I interpret it. I'm more interested in identifying promising writers than finding that lightning in a bottle can't miss spec. It's kind of the same idea as giving someone a fish or teaching them how to fish. If somebody already knows how, they're going to go out and catch more than one fish. That's very valuable in this business. So tying back to my previous answer about what's most important, I want to say that just demonstrating an unusually high-level storytelling capability, whatever that means to you, is what really turns my head. There isn't one style or skill that writers like that share. Doing it in your own distinctive way is kind of the point, right? I can't tell you that it's plotting or it's characterization or dialogue or description. Sometimes it's one or two of those things that really stand out to me as being remarkable. And sometimes it's just the people who can do all of those things well. But as a reader, you know when you're in the hands of someone who can make any story that they tell seize and sustain your interest. Someone who can make that movie or TV show play in your head. A show or a movie that you not only enjoy, but after you've done reading it, you take something from it with you, some insight into the universality of being human, or maybe about living in a very particular culture in one specific moment in time, but something that lingers with you after the read is over. That turns my head. That can be a showstopper.
That is the best when you're thinking about it afterwards.
Yeah.
How about you, David? Is there anything that a new writer can do with a script that gives you pause?
For me, it's the characters have to come alive. If the characters are alive, I will read anything you write. If the characters work and the dialogue is strong. Again, I guess that's my, that's what I really look for is the dialogue. If that works, you got my attention.
Great.
To me, that's kind of how I identify a great writer based on the voice of his or her characters. And the story can be okay. It can be whatever it is. But if the characters talk to me, you got me.
I'm interested. Just sidebar. What's a movie that you feel that the dialogue is spot on?
A movie like Network.
Oh yeah.
That's the dialogue is unreal.
Yeah.
All About Eve. The dialogue.
One of my favorite movies. Yeah,
the dialogue is unreal. And I guess you could even say maybe for a little more closer to present day, I would have to mention Tarantino can just
absolutely.
He could have characters sitting at a table for 20 minutes talking, and you're in, and it's interesting.
That was the first thing I thought of personally.
Yeah. Yeah, not
Right.
to leave you out, John Log, you may have already just answered with Tarantino, but is there a movie that you really liked because of the dialogue?
Yeah, David threw out some great examples there. Yeah, my first thought was Tarantino comes to mind because so often that's all characters are doing. And the opening sequence in Inglorious Bastards, where they're in this farmhouse
Oh
and
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
tension with Hans
Yeah.
Landa just, casually interrogating these characters when we know people are hiding underneath the floor. It's just incredible. And it goes on for
I
much
could
longer
not
than most
breathe.
people can get away with.
Yeah. Yes, yes, and I could not breathe during that scene. What would you say, David? What would you say to a screenwriter who knows they wrote an excellent script, but it doesn't win or place in a competition?
You don't let your spirit be crushed. You got to understand, you're being evaluated by a group of readers, and everyone's going to have a different opinion. So at the end of the day, if it doesn't win or place in the competition, it doesn't mean that a lot of readers didn't like it or love it. You've got to keep your spirits up. Take whatever notes you get, rework the script, and then try to make it as good as you can, really. But give up. No, you don't do that.
Right. How about you, John?
Very much along those same lines. I would just tell this person, you're going to be fine. Keep at it. Every level of the entertainment industry is a crapshoot in some way because it's so subjective. The decisions are made by people, and people have good days and bad days and different tastes. I don't think algorithms or AI making the calls would be any better either, but it is what it is. The reason we are screenwriters and why we stick with it is that being a screenwriter, you have the ability to create compelling stories on demand, or at least more than once. And if that's the case, the fate of one story or another at any given time is not within your control. It's going to require good fortune for good things to happen. You probably already know that all the greats have been rejected countless times, and they've many more times than they've gotten others to say yes. So just have faith in your ability to make every script just a little bit better than the last one, and know that your journey is moving you forward, not in circles, even though it's going to seem that way at times.
Right. My last question for you both. We'll start with you, David. Is there any specific advice that we haven't covered here that you'd like to offer to the writers out there?
The one thing, again, to really stress, your job is to get noticed. So you want to keep in mind that there's human beings reading your script. Okay.
Yep.
Number two, you want to keep in mind that this is a business. Okay. Which means money is going to be spent to buy your script and, to hopefully make it into a film. All right. So when you're writing your screenplay, you have to be a writer, obviously, and an artist, but you also have to be a business person and keep in mind what you're putting on the page. Like I said, don't try and write Star Wars, because unless it's George Lucas is behind you, this script it's not going to get made. It's not going to get. It's going to be tough to get it looked at. Be artists, okay? Tell your story, but also think about the industry that you want to be involved in, and think about, maybe put on your producer hat and think what actors could be in this, how much does this cost, and remember the script is more attractive if it's short, sweet, to the point, the characters are fantastic, and the settings aren't ridiculous, and it's not too expensive to film. And I know that might sound a little kind of cutthroat, but this is what's going on nowadays.
John?
I'll sign off on everything that David just said and add a little bit more. I like that analogy that a screenplay is like the blueprint for a house. Writers, to all writers in any genre, in your foundational design, try to do something that makes what you build immediately recognizable as different from all the other houses on the block. industry gatekeepers of all kinds, from the contest judges to development people, representatives. We're all reading constantly. We've read hundreds, if not thousands, of scripts. If from the logline level, something about your project makes it something we haven't read a dozen of already, you've got us on your side immediately, assuming that that something makes for good drama. And to the thriller horror writers specifically, I'll say, don't give short shrift to your characters. There are only so many forms of jeopardy that your story can put them in. What makes us care is our interest in, or our emotional investment in, the people involved. Go beyond those basic backstories and personality types to give us characters who seem like real people. It's worth the effort. And finally, when it comes to TV drama specifically, my advice is to be very mindful of the pilot's true purpose. You're seeding a field here with no guarantee that anyone will ever see the crops grow, let alone those crops will be harvested, sold, and consumed. The reader who is going to champion your show is the reader who is convinced that it represents fertile ground, loaded with the seeds of compelling storylines to grow later. And all we have to do now is add water, so to speak. So
Right.
every good idea that you have for the whole show should at least be hinted at in a way that we can pick up and ponder as the reader without too much effort. This might be your only shot to sell us on the potential of the whole series, so make your best case. Leave it all on the field.
That's great. Gentlemen, what great advice. I really enjoyed this. I think that you're going to help a lot of writers out there. And I think no matter what level you're at, you guys were just hitting such good points. I'd like to thank you both once again for joining us on the Writers Hangout.
Thank you, Sandy. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Sandy. I had a lot of fun. This was great.
That's a wrap for the Writers Hangout. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, like, and thrive. Till we get to hang out again, keep writing. The world needs your stories. The Writers Hangout is sponsored by the Page International Screenwriting Awards. Executive producer, Kristen O'Verne. Producers, Terry Sampson and Sandy Adamitis. Music by Ethan Stoller.